Hi, welcome to this video. In this video specifically, we've got a potential distributor who's asking some questions, and so I'm quite happy to have a first cut at answering those questions. The questions are really around about how food sense and some of our applications compare to incumbent technologies, and that's what I'm going to go through here. So this is the food sense generation 4. I think this is somewhat in order of uptake. By far the thing that we've been doing the most is chili. Recently we've been having some good traction with caffeine, and we have been able to sell into the caffeine testing market. One with tea and then another one with coffee, but we're also quite interested in the energy drinks as well. And then food sense, I got this titled here, Food Sense and Sense It All. So Sense It All is actually the technology platform. Whenever we apply it into the food industry, we often call it food sense. And I know it's a bit confusing, but we also sort of call it Sense It All as well, because if we're doing heavy metal detection like lead and copper in drinking water, it doesn't feel very food sense at that point. So then we tend to use the term Sense It All, because that's kind of how we originally called it. But when we were in the food industry, then it made more sense to call it food sense. All right. So we have, so sorry about the ambiguity in the name there, but Sense It All and Food Sense is actually the same technology. So chili is by far the application that we have the most traction in, because historically that's the one we've been in the longest. Caffeine is something that we're getting good traction in recently, and to a much more minor extent, gingerol. And I won't even touch on gingerol today, because I just feel like this is a bit USA centric, that ginger is not a big thing in the USA. When I say this particular video is USA centric, and ginger is not really a big thing in my opinion in the US. Actually, it may be more of a sort of Asian thing. Heavy metal detection definitely is a big thing in the US. There's EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, definitely has things like it's either, I think it's 5 ppb parts per billion of on lead, and it may be 1,000 ppb or 1 ppm on copper. And we're also getting some interest from mining companies in heavy metal detection as well. So I will touch upon that a little bit today. So on the chili front, I'm sure most of you a lot of you be aware that actually the incumbent on chili is either people own an HPLC, and I think that's actually quite rare. People do not own a high performance liquid chromatography when it comes to capsaicin testing in chilies. They don't. They send it out for test. So the competition really is the service industry. And then you've got the food sense generation 4. Now the capex on an HPLC is probably 50,000 to 100,000 US dollars. It can be in excess of of 100,000 US dollars, but in the food industry you wouldn't really need, you don't need HPLC MS, that's mass spectroscopy. You probably just need a UV detector. The capex on a food sense generation 4 is much less than 3,000. So, you could almost, for 50,000, you can get something like 45. 10 of them would be 30,000, 15 would be 45,000. Yeah, you may be able to get 15 upwards of these for one HPLC system. What's wrong with HPLC? Well, nothing's wrong with HPLC as long as you're running services on it that can actually justify the owning of an HPLC. But of course, there's a certain complexity to it. I mean, I'll talk about operational costs in a minute, but it does require organic solvents. It does have moving parts like pumps. The pumps will need heads replacing on occasions. You've got injection ports. You've got columns that will block. You've got detectors that are drifting. So in fact, the system requires fairly regular calibration. And just out of interest, it doesn't give you Scoville heat unit. It actually gives you a chromatogram, which you've then got to interpret. So you've actually left to do a bit of science. You have to do calibration, and you have to do interpretation of your peak height versus that calibration. So an HPLC is basically complex, whereas I would absolutely argue that the food sense generation 4, I'm really sorry, is actually simple. I literally have children. I do have children, and they can run this unit. So they're pretty smart, admittedly, but a 12-year-old or 11-year-old boy can actually run the food sense generation 4. As I say, the the HPLC does not give you Scoville heat unit. It gives you a peak. It gives you a chromatogram. So you're actually still left to interpret it. You first of all have to identify the peak, which may be straightforward enough. But then you have to look at the area under that curve, compare it against a calibration plot. And you don't know if you're an end user of the service when they last did the calibration. You know, these systems drift. So, you know, if they did a calibration a month ago, you've definitely got error due to that. So, but with the FoodSense Generation 4, it actually gives you the Scoville heat unit there and then. You know, you don't have to actually interpret it. What I might do is just a quick demonstration of the FoodSense Generation 4 in its chili testing mode. So I'm going to grab a sensor. So one of the top selling sauces in the US is Frank's Red Hot Sauce. I'm not quite sure who actually makes it. I can check that in a minute. But anyway, I'm just going to put a bit of Frank's Red Hot Sauce into a beaker here. So you know that I am using Frank's Red Hot Sauce. And I will... Now it's kind of interesting actually, because Frank's Red Hot Sauce, it cost me about $1.90. Now the reason I bring that up a little bit is because when you're selling products at $1.90, you can understand that actually doing HPLC analysis on that, those two numbers do not make any sense. You know, you're selling something for $1.90 and you're trying to do analysis of that product on a system that may cost $50,000 to $100,000 US. Those two numbers do not align. The equipment's too expensive to justify testing a product that you're otherwise selling for $1.90, and that's the selling price. You know, there's a lot of brokers in that value chain. Anyway, let me grab the sample. All right, so Frank's Red Hot Sauce goes into that. Great. Let me grab 9 volumes of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I got my 9 volumes. I'm just going to do a quick vortexer on this. It's a vortexer you can buy off Amazon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That'll do that. Now I'll grab 50 microliters of that 1 in 10 diluted Frank's Red Hot Sauce. I'll just give this a quick name so I can find it later on. 101. Yeah, good. Right. I'll put 50 microliters onto the sensor, which I'm doing. Hey, right, done. Right, and then I'll go continue. 1 in 10 dilution, so just choose 1 in 10, start measurement, and off it goes. Now, I'm realizing that in supermarkets, they have a kind of aisle position called table sauces. So supermarkets are not selling super hot sauces because the consumer's just not going to take it. There's a group of people who are making intrinsically hot sauces, but it's called Frank's Red Hot Sauce. It's no criticism of Frank. It also says, blended for flavor in some way. So I completely understand the point that they are not trying to really blow somebody's head off with a very high Scoville heat unit. They're actually trying to make something that's the consumer will essentially buy. So what I need to do is I've got the result, 2,110 Scoville heat units. I'm just going to go up to something called Julie because it also says that upload complete. So let me just share my screen with you here, which I will do screen here. I'm just logging in now. And then I can come into here, go demo, which is a cluster. I've got a couple of units. Here's the unit here. Frank's Red Hot 101. Good. There we go. And then I got the result. I can see my peak 1, my peak 2, and my peak 3. I can see my capsaicin peak here. I can see date in London, time in London, the operator, especially if you're a real manufacturer of this kind of stuff, you know, you want to kind of have a certain traceability on this. So I can actually export that. I could put a signature on it, but I'm not going to. So you can really understand how this can fit into the quality system. So this is not like an HPLC system. This is almost like sample to certificate of analysis, you know, final report technology. Really, HPLC is only doing one job, which is basically creating a chromatogram, but it's a very expensive procedure to get to that chromatogram. And even when you get to that chromatogram, you've then got to interpret it. And to interpret it, you've got to have recently calibrated that machine. And by the way, nobody's got any guarantees that machine was recently calibrated. Now I'm going to go into caffeine a little bit. We are getting some good traction with caffeine. You can do caffeine analysis using HPLC. Everything I just said about, you know, the problems with HPLC in chilies, just the same. I mean, you know, we're talking here about energy drinks, be it Monster, be it Red Bull, be it instant coffee. You know, these kind of products may just cost, you know, a couple of dollars, and then you're trying to run an HPLC system in order to kind of analyze their caffeine content. It doesn't line up. You can also do it on UV spectrometry, but the UV spectrometry leaves you kind of hanging in some ways. It leaves you with the raw signal. Now you just saw what I just did. When I did the chili measurement now, or the capsaicin measurement, I had the raw signal, but we took the raw signal, we processed the raw signal, we turned it into a number, so that somebody who was not expert could answer the question, what's the Scoville heat unit? Well, we can do the same for caffeine as well. We can tell you how many milligrams per gram are actually in there. So with caffeine, there is an HPLC method, but again, it kind of requires a fair amount of scientific rigor. And it only brings you to a raw signal. It doesn't bring you on and actually complete the job by telling you how many milligrams per grams of caffeine are in there. By the way, there's also a method of doing supplements as well, and there are videos on our YouTube channel about us actually doing caffeine supplements as well. So we can do caffeines, energy drinks, caffeine supplements, no probs. I'm not going to do a demo. The reason I'm not going to do a demo is because we've actually got a webinar specifically for distributors this week, and so that will be useful to you then. I'm just going to kind of show you that actually we can. I've got these QR codes in front of me. I'm in my chili mode at the moment. I'm just going to go over to caffeine. That's not caffeine. I'm just going to go over to caffeine. I scanned the nitrate by accident, was what what I did. So let me just find Sense It All. Right, Sense It All. And that was lead, but that's interesting. I just scanned lead by a little bit by accident, but no big issue. I just want to get the caffeine there. pH. I keep hitting that nitrate one. So we can do the let me just bring it in. So we can do capsaicin, we can do lead, but for every QR code, we can do, in fact, yeah, I've got another QR code as well. This one is actually specifically for doing energy drinks, because I got a suspicion that one of the biggest applications for this will end up being, I suspect it's a legal requirement to actually do how much caffeine did you put into that energy drink. And they're all, by the way, they all seem to be about 0.32 milligrams per gram. But it's a very quick way of doing energy drinks. So as I say, we do have a distributors webinar this week. Hope you can come. We also making good access on lead and copper at the moment. Lead and copper is a regulatory requirement, especially in things like drinking water. The other incumbent method on this is ICP-MS, inductive coupled plasma mass spectroscopy. Good luck owning one, let alone saying it. Ownership on a kind of instrument like this is about $250,000 to $500,000 US dollars, even worse than HPLC. But it's a regulatory requirement that they do this testing. Food Sense Generation 4, which can the same instrument can do chili, caffeine, and lead and copper, by the way, as well. So you can understand the beauty of this, that if you're reselling this instrument, wow, how many markets can you really hit with this actually? So you end up becoming expert on the unit, but there's so many markets and customer needs you can actually feed with this particular unit. Now, with ICP-MS, because it's such a lab-based system, you can actually have quite a lot of people involved in actually getting that sample to the lab, administrating it, running it, reporting back. You know, so you could have 8 to 9 people involved. With the Sense It All, you saw me do a chili test earlier on. How many people were involved? 1. Time to result. You saw me do that chili test earlier on. Time to result, less than 5 minutes. Time to result with an ICP-MS, 6 weeks. Sample collection. I mean, I'm just kind of, billing my time here, so maybe it costs me $5 to do a lead analysis and a copper analysis. But lead and copper get done at the same time. By the way, it's one sample, get lead and copper at the same time. So it's about $5 to do that. There's no transportation or logistics. You could argue that, there's transportation in terms of we can do on-field testing or on-site testing, whereas you certainly can't do on-site testing with an ICP-MS. There's very little material costs in running the Food Sensor Generation 4. Individually, these sensors cost €3.50, that's about $3.50 each. The labor cost, me sitting here doing that kind of work, as opposed to actually doing it in a real laboratory with all the kind of fume hoods, etc., that's actually a lot more expensive. The facilities overheads required to host that ICP-MS is very different to the costs to actually own a Food Sensor Generation 4. Food Sensor Generation 4 actually does offer, especially when you're doing lead and copper testing, it's very hard. Like you walk into a house and a house may have, several taps, 2 downstairs, 1 in the middle bathroom, and maybe 1 on a top floor bathroom. You can understand that when you're trying to do this kind of surveying, and this kind of surveying happens, it gets very confusing because somebody has to go in there, collect samples from all these taps, fill out the documentation, because later on somebody's got to then work out, oh, this sample's from this tap, this sample's from this tap, this sample's from this tap. Can you understand the complexity and administration? Whereas with the with the Sense It All, when we're doing copper and lead, no, that it's much easier for the person to have kind of understanding of this is the result from this tap, because they can go to the tap, they can collect the sample, do the result there and then, so they're not left in this confusion later on, 6 weeks later on, when they're trying to actually tie all the samples back again. And as I say, you can go, let me just do a quick scan on ginger, lead is that. So there we are. I've gone to lead now. So we can also do, as I say, lead as well. And we are doing a distributor demo webinar this week. So I hope you can come to that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.